Well, vaccine mandates have been rolling out across many provinces, sparking some protests and heated debate about whether or not vaccine mandates violate people's rights. In the United States, the American Civil Liberties Union has penned an op-ed where they make the case that those mandates protect freedoms rather than limit them. So what about Canada? Well, Michael Bryant is the Executive Director and General Counsel of the Canadian Civil Liberties Association. Michael Bryant, glad to have you with us. Want to know where your organization stands, and this is really along the lines of, do vaccine mandates, in your opinion, violate civil rights?
I just want to be clear when we're talking about vaccine mandates, what we're talking about here. Yeah. We aren't talking about forcible injections. What we're really talking about is a licensing or credentialing regime around crowd control. Right now, basically, the rules around large gatherings is you can't have them. And that's obviously an infringement on liberty. What's being proposed is that you get a credential that will permit you to either enter a certain workplace, which is one context, or go to a publicly accessible business or other public service, provided you've got that credential. And really, then the question is, okay, what do you need to get that credential? And different countries, different jurisdictions, and maybe even different provinces are requiring different criteria. The one that they all have is if you are vaccinated or double vaccinated, then you get the license basically to be able to go in there. Or in the case of Quebec, if you can prove that you're unvaccinatable, or in Israel, for example, if you can show that you contracted COVID already and you no longer have it. It's not about creating a risk-free scenario. It's about a lower risk scenario, whereas right now the presumption is that it's just too high risk for too many people to get together. So instead, what's being proposed when they call them vaccine passports and vaccine mandates, really it is about what criteria you would need in order to get the credential that would allow you to enter these crowded places.
Okay, so let me break it down with you, because there'll be practical examples where this impacts people's lives. And I think what you're saying very clearly, that you can't go and stick a needle into somebody against their will. That's not on. But let's move on to what you believe is justifiable. And I would take the examples of, could someone go into a restaurant without being vaccinated? Is that a justifiable denial of access if they are not vaccinated?
I think that provided that there isn't just one criteria, then you are not discriminating on the basis of an immutable characteristic. You aren't violating our human rights code. So if somebody medically can't be vaccinated, then is there not a way to accommodate that person? They can go in the restaurant as long as they're masked and social distance. Will that create a low enough risk that this is acceptable to science? And we'll get the answer from science. But in the restaurant context, to use that one in particular, provided that there's no discrimination taking place, provided that the Caucasians are not asked for the credentials, but if someone is dark-skinned, they do get asked for the credentials. Provided that all the human rights codes are being observed, then given the circumstances of a restaurant, that would be proportionate and necessary and constitutionally kosher.
Okay, so universally applied. Now we're using the restaurant or the movie theater or that kind of an example. What about a job? Is it is it a denial of someone's rights, in your opinion, to say to someone who has a job in a particular place that you can't come here, or you can't have this job, or you must work from home if you are not vaccinated?
The way the law works there is, firstly, you look at what the employment agreement is, and there are going to be people who are signing employment agreements now where they have to agree, yep, I'm gonna get vaccinated if I'm going to come into the workplace. Most workers, however, there won't be a collective agreement that addresses a pandemic, or there won't be an employment agreement that addresses the pandemic. So in that case, the law asks what is reasonable. And reasonable ends up boiling down to, depending on the function, what's involved here. Are you an accountant working remotely from home? Well, that would be unreasonable to require that person to be vaccinated in order to be employed. Are you going to be in contact with people all the time and that's your job? Well, then that would require it, although employers do have an obligation to accommodate those people who are unvaccinatable if it's possible. So if you can give them a desk job or a remote job for a defined period of time, then that would be reasonable.
Okay, you talk about people who are unvaccinatable. These are people who have medical exemptions, and we hear a lot about people talking about medical exemptions, but I think we also hear from medical officials who say, no, it's actually really, really narrow, the number of people who would have a medical exemption. But let me ask you about religion. Are religious grounds under our charter a sufficient reason to overcome all of these passport or mandate requirements?
I think the answer is yes, that would make the person, in essence, unvaccinatable, not for medical reasons, but instead because of freedom of religion. But practically speaking, in Canada, to date, we're not aware of any of the great world religions who have come forward and said, yeah, we've got a real problem with this. There are some religions in the United States, depends what a religion is, right? There, in the United States, this has become an issue, I believe. In Canada to date, we've not become aware of a religion that said that it's against the religion to be vaccinated. That's not to say that it might not come up, but I think practically speaking, I do not think that's going to be an issue in Canada.
Okay, what is an issue, because we're in the middle of a federal election campaign, is the issue of mandates and passports. And I'm sure I don't have to tell you that Justin Trudeau has said there should be things to get on a plane, to get on a train, that he wants the federal public service to be vaccinated. Aaron O'Toole, as the Conservative leader, has said he does not want that. He doesn't want to force people who are in the federal public service to get it in order to keep their jobs. Have you had thoughts on the way in which this has become politicized?
Yes, and it's become politicized in the United States too, in that sense. So just just because it's political doesn't necessarily mean it's horrible or wrong. But our take on it would be that you would need to, that the labor law, which I talked about before, what's reasonable, you would have to make some distinctions, I would have thought, between, if we're going to talk about federal workers, the accountant working for the Canadian Revenue Agency remotely, or someone who could work remotely, should that person be required to be vaccinated versus, for example, the RCMP? So in each case, you'd need to look at whether or not it was necessary and proportionate. I think that it would be, I am assuming that that is something that the unions will be raising with their employer when we get the details of that. And I think maybe the most important thing I could say to you in this interview is that what matters is what's in the regulations, what's in the laws. Are there any exceptions or accommodations built in there? We have the rules and regulations released in Quebec and in Manitoba. We don't have them yet in Ontario and British Columbia. We don't have them yet with respect to the federal employment mandate. So really, the devil really is in the details.
Yeah, those details certainly matter. Michael Bryant of the CCLA, thanks very much for your time.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.